My husband accused me of lying about my past, until one text revealed his true colors. Everything about Ryan seemed perfect when we first met. He had this warm smile that made me feel safe, like I'd finally found someone who would never hurt me. After all the bad relationships in my past, Ryan felt like a gift from the universe. He listened when I talked, brought me coffee in bed, and never once raised his voice. For 2 years, our marriage was everything I dreamed of. Ryan supported my career, celebrated my small wins, and held me when I cried about my past therapy sessions. I thought I'd finally escaped the cycle of toxic relationships that had haunted my 20s. We bought a house together, adopted a cat, and talked about having kids someday. Ryan worked as a paralegal at a downtown law firm, and I was climbing the ladder at my marketing company. Life felt stable, predictable, and beautiful. I'd wake up every morning grateful for the peace I'd found. My therapist even said I seemed like a completely different person than the broken woman who'd walked into her office 3 years earlier. But what I didn't know was that the man I married was already planning my downfall. Everything changed the week I got promoted to senior marketing director. I came home bubbling with excitement, ready to celebrate with my husband. But instead of the congratulations I expected, Ryan seemed distant. He barely looked up from his laptop when I shared the news. "That's great, honey," he said flatly, not even closing his computer screen. Over the next few days, his behavior grew stranger. He'd watch me during phone calls with work colleagues, taking notes on a small pad he'd quickly hide when I walked by. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague and evasive. He started working late more often, claiming new cases at the firm required extra hours. The worst part was how he looked at me sometimes, like he was studying me, searching for something. When I'd catch him staring, he'd quickly smile and change the subject. But those moments felt cold, calculating. Nothing like the man who used to stroke my hair while I told him about my day. Then, out of nowhere, he asked me, "Are you sure you've told me everything about your past?" His question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd been mostly honest about my past, but there were things I'd kept vague. The therapy sessions for depression, the string of toxic boyfriends who'd manipulated and gaslighted me, the time I'd briefly dated someone while technically still married to my first husband during our separation. Nothing criminal or scandalous, just messy human stuff I wasn't proud of. Everyone has chapters in their story they'd rather not revisit, right? I'd told Ryan about my general struggles with mental health and bad relationships, but I hadn't gone into specific details about every mistake I'd made. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just wondering if there's anything else I should know about your past relationships, your choices." The way he said choices made my skin crawl. It sounded judgmental, almost disgusted. This wasn't the man I'd married. Ryan had always been understanding about my past struggles. He'd held my hand through panic attacks and never made me feel ashamed of my therapy sessions. I told myself some things were better left in the past, until Ryan found a way to dig them up. A week later, Ryan came home from work carrying a manila envelope. His face was serious, almost triumphant. He sat me down at our kitchen table and slowly pulled out a printed photograph. It was a picture of me outside a courthouse 3 years ago, standing next to Derek, my ex-boyfriend. We were holding hands, and I was wearing the blue dress I'd thrown away after our messy breakup. I remembered that day vividly. We'd gone to support his cousin during a custody hearing. It was completely innocent, but the photo made it look intimate, romantic even. "Care to explain this?" Ryan asked, sliding the photo across the table. My heart started racing. "Where did you get this?" "Someone sent it to me, along with some very interesting information about your relationship with Derek. Apparently, you were still seeing him while we were dating." "That's not true," I protested. "That was just a friend thing. His cousin needed support during—" "Elena," Ryan interrupted, using the tone he reserved for cross-examining witnesses at work. "I know when you're lying." And with that, everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered in 1 second. Ryan stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. He didn't answer my calls or texts. I sat on our couch, staring at that photograph, trying to figure out who could have sent it and why. The picture itself wasn't damaging. Derek and I really were just friends by that point, but someone had clearly spun it into something more sinister. Someone had been watching me, following me, documenting my life from 3 years ago. When Ryan finally came home the next evening, he was cold and distant. He slept in the guest room and barely spoke to me for days. When he did talk, it was to ask pointed questions about my past. Had I been faithful? Had I lied about other things? Could he trust anything I'd told him? I tried explaining the Derek situation again and again, but Ryan would just shake his head like I was making things worse. He started making comments about my pattern of deception and how maybe he didn't really know me at all. But what I didn't expect was that this was only the beginning of something much darker. My best friend, Jasmine, came over the following weekend. She'd known me through all my messy relationships and could see how shaken I was. After I told her everything, she frowned and shook her head. "Elena, this sounds like a setup," she said. "Who randomly has a 3-year-old photo of you and Derek? And why would they send it to Ryan now, right after your promotion?" Her words made sense, but I couldn't wrap my head around it. Who would want to sabotage my marriage, and why? "You need to find out where that photo came from," Jasmine continued. "Did Ryan say it came in an email?" I nodded. He said someone sent him information about me. "Then trace the email. Find out who sent it." That night, while Ryan was showering, I carefully looked through his laptop browser history. I found his email account still logged in and searched for anything from the past 2 weeks. There it was, an email with the subject line, "Information about your wife," sent from a generic Gmail account. And when I traced the email source, my stomach dropped. It came from Ryan's office block. The next few days, I started paying closer attention to Ryan's behavior. I noticed things I'd somehow missed before. How he'd quickly close his phone when I walked into a room. How he'd take calls outside, even in bad weather. How he'd started going on more work trips that he'd never mentioned before. One evening, I pretended to be asleep when he came to bed. Through barely open eyes, I watched him text someone for 20 minutes, his face lit by the blue glow of his screen. He was smiling at whatever conversation he was having. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. When he thought I was fully asleep, he whispered into his phone, "Tomorrow night. She'll be at her book club until 10. Book club? I'd never mentioned having a book club. In fact, I'd stopped going to book club months ago, but never told Ryan because he always seemed uninterested in my activities. The next day, I decided to come home early from work instead of going anywhere. I parked down the street and watched our house. At 7 p.m., a woman I'd never seen before walked up to our front door. Ryan let her in immediately, like he'd been expecting her. And then I found a deleted message thread that he forgot to clear with a woman I'd never heard of. I knew I needed proof of whatever Ryan was up to. The next day, I bought a small device that would let me mirror his phone activity to an old iPad I kept in my home office. I waited until he left for work, then quickly installed the software on his phone. It would sync everything to the iPad through the cloud. I felt sick doing it. This wasn't the kind of person I wanted to be. Suspicious, sneaky, spying on my own husband. But something was very wrong with our marriage, and I needed to understand what. The waiting was torture. Every time Ryan came home, I'd smile and act normal while my heart pounded. He was still giving me the cold shoulder, still asking pointed questions about my honesty, still sleeping in the guest room. But now I could see it for what it really was, a performance. I made dinner, folded his laundry, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was screaming. Who was the woman who'd come to our house? Why had someone from his office building sent him that photo? What was he planning that required me to be out of the house? And less than a week later, I saw a text come through that changed everything. The text appeared on the iPad while I was eating breakfast. Ryan was upstairs getting dressed for work and his phone was charging in the kitchen. The message was from someone labeled LS in his contacts. "How much longer do we have to keep this up? I'm tired of pretending." Ryan's response made my blood freeze. "Almost got her out of the house yesterday. Just need her to crack completely. Then she'll sign everything over and leave on her own." Sign everything over? Our house was in both our names. My promotion came with stock options. My savings account had grown significantly since we'd been married. Was Ryan trying to get me to leave so he could keep everything? More messages followed. LS, the photo worked perfectly. She's been defensive and apologetic all week. Exactly. Make someone feel guilty enough and they'll do anything to prove they're trustworthy. Even sign papers without reading them. You're sure she won't fight back? Elena? No way. She's too damaged from her past relationships. She'll blame herself and walk away quietly. I wanted to scream, but I knew this wasn't the time to play my hand yet. For the next week, I played the perfect confused wife. I apologized for lying about Derek, even though I'd done nothing wrong. I made Ryan's favorite meals and asked how I could rebuild his trust, all while screenshot every text between him and LS. Their messages revealed the entire plan. LS was Linda Stevens, a paralegal at Ryan's firm who he'd been dating for 6 months. They'd been planning to drive me to a mental breakdown, so I'd sign divorce papers that heavily favored Ryan. The courthouse photo was something Linda had found through a private investigator. Ryan had never suspected I was anything but faithful. This was purely about money. My promotion, my savings, my stake in our house. He'd researched my past therapy for depression and decided I'd be an easy target for psychological manipulation. But the most chilling part was how well he knew my triggers. Every cruel comment about my pattern of deception was designed to make me feel like the broken person I used to be. He was deliberately trying to undo years of healing. But then he dropped a name during a phone call that made my heart freeze. Dr. Martinez says Elena was severely damaged by her previous relationships, Ryan told Linda during a call I was secretly recording. She'll crumble under pressure. Trust me, I've been studying her therapy notes. Dr. Martinez was my therapist, the woman who'd helped me rebuild my self-worth after years of toxic relationships. How did Ryan have access to my therapy notes? That night, Ryan suddenly announced he was moving back into our bedroom. I've been thinking about what you said, he told me sweetly. Maybe we can work through this trust issue together. He brought me flowers and cooked dinner. He apologized for being distant and said he wanted to save our marriage. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a loving reconciliation. But I could see it for what it was, the next phase of his manipulation. He held me that night, whispering about how much he loved me and how sorry he was for doubting me. His arms felt like chains around my chest. Every sweet word was poison designed to make me lower my guard. And as he hugged me that night, I realized this man had no idea he was being watched. I decided to expose Ryan at our friend's monthly dinner party. Tom and Sarah hosted every first Saturday, and Ryan never missed it. He loved playing the devoted husband in front of our social circle. It was the perfect stage for his downfall. I spent the week preparing. I transferred all the screenshots and recordings to a cloud drive, then set up a presentation on my phone. I'd connected my phone to Tom and Sarah's Bluetooth speaker system before. They always let me play music during dinner prep. That Saturday, Ryan was particularly affectionate. He held my hand during dinner and told everyone how lucky he was to have such an honest, faithful wife. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. After dessert, I stood up and asked if I could make a toast. Everyone raised their glasses, smiling expectantly. Ryan beamed at me from across the table. I want to thank my husband Ryan for teaching me that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know least, I began. Then I opened my phone and selected AirDrop to Bluetooth speaker. As I hit AirDrop, I watched his face drain of color right as the screenshots blasted through the Bluetooth speaker. The room fell completely silent as Ryan's text messages played through the speaker. Everyone could hear his voice saying, "Almost got her out of the house. Just need her to crack completely." Linda's voice followed. "You're sure she won't fight back?" Ryan's response, "Elena? No way. She's too damaged from her past relationships." Tom reached over and turned off the speaker, but the damage was done. 8 of our closest friends had heard everything. Ryan sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Elena, I can explain," he started. "Explain what?" Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp with disgust. "Explain how you've been psychologically abusing your wife. Explain how you plan to steal her money." Our friend Marcus, who was a lawyer, leaned forward. "Ryan, did you really access her private therapy records?" Instead of answering, Ryan pushed back from the table so violently his chair fell over. "This is insane," he shouted. "You're all crazy if you believe this." But before I could catch my breath, Ryan grabbed his keys and ran out of the house into the night. The next Monday, I met with Patricia Williams, the divorce lawyer Marcus had recommended. She listened to the recordings and examined all my evidence with growing anger. "This is financial abuse and intentional infliction of emotional distress," she said. "We can definitely get an injunction against him accessing any joint accounts or property." Patricia filed for divorce that afternoon and requested an emergency hearing for asset protection. She also contacted the state bar about Ryan's unethical access to my therapy records. His paralegal career was likely over. I felt powerful for the first time in months. Every document I signed was a step toward freedom. Ryan had tried to make me feel small and broken, but instead he'd awakened something fierce in me. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "You have no idea what you've started. I know things about you that will destroy your career and your life. Drop the divorce or face the consequences." But just when I thought it was over, Ryan sent me one last message. A threat I never saw coming. Ryan's final text was a photo of me entering Dr. Martinez's office with the caption, "Mentally unstable wife seeks therapy. How will your new promotion look when they learn about your psychological problems?" He was threatening to sabotage my career by exposing my mental health treatment. In some states, that might be illegal, but the damage to my reputation could be irreversible. Corporate America still stigmatized therapy, especially for women in leadership positions. But I refused to be intimidated. Instead of backing down, I did something that surprised even me. I started a blog about psychological abuse and manipulation in marriages. I wrote about gaslighting, financial abuse, and the courage it takes to leave a toxic relationship. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of women shared their own stories in the comments. Many said reading my experience helped them recognize similar patterns in their own relationships. I also decided to use my promotion for good. I started a nonprofit organization for women escaping financially abusive marriages, using my marketing skills to raise awareness and funds. And as I opened the doors to my new office, there he was, waiting at the corner, watching me. For weeks, Ryan showed up everywhere. At my coffee shop in the morning, outside my gym, across the street from my office building. He never approached me directly, but his presence was constant and menacing. I documented every sighting, taking photos and noting times and locations. Patricia said it was building a strong case for a restraining order. But honestly, I was exhausted by the constant vigilance. My nonprofit was growing rapidly. We'd helped 12 women in our first month, providing legal referrals, temporary housing assistance, and emotional support groups. The work was healing for me, turning my pain into purpose. Ryan's attempts at intimidation were backfiring. Instead of making me feel weak, they reminded me daily of why I'd left. Every time I saw him lurking in the shadows, I felt grateful for my freedom. My friends rallied around me too. Tom and Sarah had spread the word about what Ryan had done, and our entire social circle had cut him out completely. No one wanted to associate with someone capable of such calculated cruelty. But when I got home that night, my living room window was open, and I knew I had locked it. I called the police immediately. They searched the house but found no signs of forced entry. The window lock appeared to have been picked professionally. Nothing was missing, but someone had definitely been inside. The officer suggested I install a security system and change all my locks. "Domestic situations can escalate quickly," he warned. "Document everything and don't hesitate to call." That night, I stayed at Jasmine's house. As we sat in her kitchen drinking wine, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you think Ryan is dangerous?" I'd been asking myself the same thing. The man I'd married seemed incapable of violence, but then again, I'd never imagined he was capable of psychological torture either. How well do we really know anyone? 3 days later, Ryan showed up at my office at midnight. I was working late on a grant proposal when I heard someone pounding on the glass doors. There he was, clearly drunk, shouting my name. Building security called the police while I hid in the bathroom. Through the thin walls, I could hear Ryan screaming about how I'd ruined his life and destroyed his career. As he stumbled toward me when the police arrived, something metal slipped from his jacket pocket and fell at my feet. The metal object was a key, specifically a copy of my house key. Ryan had made a duplicate before I changed the locks. That's how he'd gotten into my house and opened the window. The police arrested him for drunk and disorderly conduct, criminal trespass, and stalking. Finally, I had grounds for a restraining order. Ryan spent the night in jail, and I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Word of Ryan's arrest spread quickly through our social circle and his workplace. People who'd known us as a couple were shocked by the depth of his deception and manipulation. Many reached out to apologize for not seeing the signs sooner. My nonprofit received a surge of donations after I shared my story more publicly. A local news station interviewed me about psychological abuse in marriage, and the segment went viral online. Women from across the country contacted us seeking help. The attention was overwhelming, but empowering. I was turning my worst experience into something that could help others. Ryan had tried to silence and diminish me, but instead, his actions had given me the loudest voice I'd ever had. But behind the applause, I spotted her. The woman from his texts, LS, watching me from across the street. Seeing Linda Stevens at my speaking event was unnerving, but I decided to address it head-on. During the Q&A session, I looked directly at her and said, "Healing requires facing our truth, even when others are invested in our silence." She left immediately, but her presence reminded me that this wasn't over. Ryan might be facing legal consequences, but Linda had been an equal partner in the psychological warfare against me. I started seeing Dr. Martinez again, not because I was broken, but because growth is an ongoing process. She helped me understand that Ryan had targeted me precisely because of my strength, not my weakness. Abusers don't choose weak victims, she explained. They choose people with something worth taking. My therapy sessions became part of my public advocacy. I talked openly about the importance of mental health care and how therapy had saved my life twice, once from my toxic past and again from Ryan's manipulation. The nonprofit expanded to include a legal clinic and an emergency housing fund. We were making real differences in women's lives, providing resources I wish I'd had during my darkest moments. Then my therapist asked me, "Have you considered that he's still trying to control you, even now, from the shadows?" Dr. Martinez's question haunted me. Was I still giving Ryan power over my life by constantly looking over my shoulder? By structuring my days around his potential presence? The answer came unexpectedly when a woman named Jennifer called my office. She identified herself as Ryan's former colleague at the law firm, another paralegal who'd quit after witnessing unethical behavior. "I have information about your ex-husband that you need to see," she said. "Can we meet somewhere private?" We met at a coffee shop across town. Jennifer brought a manila envelope filled with documents that made my hands shake. Legal papers showing Ryan had been falsifying client records, fake affidavits with forged signatures, evidence that he'd been stealing from client trust accounts. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," Jennifer explained. "When I heard about what he did to you, I realized I had to come forward. He's been breaking the law for months, maybe years." What she handed me next made my hands shake. Legal documents, fake affidavits, signed by Ryan himself. Armed with Jennifer's evidence, I met with Patricia and a prosecutor from the district attorney's office. Ryan wasn't just a manipulative husband. He was a criminal who'd been defrauding clients and the legal system. The DA's office opened a formal investigation. Several other paralegals came forward with similar evidence. Ryan's entire career had been built on lies and theft, just like our marriage. I decided to confront Ryan one final time before the criminal charges were filed. We met at a neutral location, the same coffee shop where I'd met Jennifer. Ryan arrived looking haggard and desperate. "Elena, please," he begged. "We can work this out. I'll give you whatever you want in the divorce. Just don't pursue the criminal charges." "It's not about what I want anymore," I told him calmly. "It's about justice for everyone you've hurt." I slid copies of Jennifer's documents across the table. Ryan's face went white as he recognized his own forged signatures. "Where did you get these?" he whispered. "People talk, Ryan. Your victims talk, and they're braver than you ever imagined." As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I looked over my shoulder and saw Ryan being handcuffed. The local news covered Ryan's arrest extensively. "Paralegal charged with fraud and identity theft" was the headline that appeared across multiple outlets. My story became part of a larger narrative about workplace crime and domestic abuse. A national magazine interviewed me for a feature about women who fought back against financial abuse. The article went viral, reaching millions of readers. My nonprofit's website crashed from the traffic, and donations poured in from around the world. I appeared on a morning talk show to discuss the warning signs of psychological manipulation. The host called me inspiring and brave, but I felt like I was just doing what any strong person would do, refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice. Ryan pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The state bar permanently revoked his license. His theft victims were awarded restitution, though many would never recover their full losses. And just when I thought it was over, a journalist called me. "Elena, you need to see this. There's more." The journalist had discovered that Ryan and Linda's scheme extended beyond just me. They'd targeted 3 other women over the past 2 years, all successful, recently promoted professionals who'd been through therapy for past relationship trauma. Each woman had received mysterious photos or documents about their past. Each had been psychologically manipulated into feeling guilty about imagined betrayals. 2 had signed divorce agreements that heavily favored their husbands before discovering the deception. We were part of a pattern, a calculated predatory system designed to exploit successful women's insecurities and steal their assets. Ryan wasn't just a manipulative husband, he was a serial psychological abuser who'd turned financial fraud into an art form. The other victims and I formed a support group. Sharing our experiences helped us understand that nothing about Ryan's abuse was personal. We were interchangeable targets, chosen for our vulnerability and resources. Together, we lobbied for stronger laws against financial abuse and psychological manipulation in marriages. Our advocacy led to new legislation protecting therapy records and criminalizing certain forms of emotional abuse. And then an anonymous letter arrived at my office with just 5 chilling words: "You were never safe." The threatening letter prompted another police investigation, but they couldn't trace its origin. My security system was upgraded, and I hired a private investigator to monitor any unusual activity around my home or office. But I refused to live in fear. My nonprofit had helped over 200 women in its first year. We'd opened a second location and hired full-time counselors and legal advocates. The work was too important to let anonymous threats derail our mission. I decided to take a solo vacation to Hawaii, something I'd never done before. It felt like the ultimate declaration of independence. I was traveling alone, staying where I wanted, doing exactly what brought me joy. The first few days were blissful. I read books on the beach, took long walks, and ate dinner whenever I felt hungry. No one was monitoring my activities or questioning my choices. I felt truly free for the first time in years. On my last night, I treated myself to dinner at an expensive restaurant overlooking the ocean. As I walked through the hotel lobby afterward, feeling peaceful and content, the front desk clerk stopped me. But as I checked into the hotel, the front desk said, "Your husband already arrived. He's waiting for you upstairs." My blood turned to ice. "I don't have a husband," I told the confused clerk. "And I'm traveling alone." The clerk checked her computer again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There must be a mistake. The reservation shows—" "What room?" I interrupted. "Room 412, right next to yours in 414. I called hotel security immediately. They escorted me to my room and did a complete sweep of the floor. Room 412 was empty, but someone had definitely been staying there. Men's clothes in the closet, a cell phone charger plugged into the wall. The hotel manager reviewed security footage and found something that made my skin crawl. A man matching Ryan's description had checked in that morning, asking specifically about my reservation and room location. But Ryan was supposed to be in prison. I called Patricia immediately, and she contacted the Department of Corrections. The shocking truth was that Ryan had been released early for good behavior, and no one had notified me. The hotel provided security for the rest of my stay, and I flew home the next morning with a police escort. But something had shifted inside me during those terrifying hours. Instead of feeling like a victim, I felt powerful. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared anymore. I was free. Back home, I doubled down on my advocacy work. Ryan's early release had violated the victim notification laws, so we sued the state and won additional protections for abuse survivors. My nonprofit expanded nationally, and I wrote a book about psychological abuse that became a bestseller. Ryan violated his parole within 6 months and was sent back to prison. Linda Stevens was charged as an accomplice and served 18 months. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to all their victims. I never saw either of them again. But every day, I saw women finding their strength, leaving toxic relationships, and rebuilding their lives. That was the real victory. Not Ryan's punishment, but the liberation of every woman who read my story and decided she deserved better. Ryan had accused me of lying about my past, but the truth was simpler and more powerful than he ever understood. My past had made me exactly who I was meant to be. My husband accused me of lying about my past, until one text revealed his true colors.